The Nashville Predators have addressed some of the defensive problems this offseason, but friends, what about goal scoring? Today, we're going to discuss what has to happen to correct last season's scoring drought.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We are, of course, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network here, your team every day. Want to kick off our Tuesday episode shouting out our Locked On Predators insiders and our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer and co-host with Penalty Box Radio and Friends. I have a partner in crime.
You do. I am Emma Lingan, and I'm an NHL reporter and host with the Hockey News.
Well, last 84 years gave us nothing but topics to talk about and problems to solve this offseason. Today, we are going to tackle one of the biggest ones. We've talked a little bit about defense. We're going to hear from one of the new additions on the blue line today, and we'll talk about that on tomorrow's show. But friends, one of the most shocking issues for the Nashville Predators last season, goal scoring. Today, we are going to talk about what went wrong last season and what are realistic expectations for Nashville when it comes to goal scoring and what has to happen to get this team with offensive talent on the roster out of the bottom of the league. We're going to share our thoughts on that today. Emma, why not just go for world peace while we're at it in the next 30 minutes?
Yeah, we'll go for world peace. We'll solve world hunger. Let's just go for it all.
Yeah. Of all of the topics that I thought that we would have to tackle after Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault joined the Nashville Predators franchise, the one I did not anticipate needing to chew on in the following offseason existentially, I did not anticipate goal scoring was going to be a problem. But friends, I'm going to just lay out some statistics, Emma, in case any of us forgot the horrors, the abject offensive horror that was last season. Last season, the Nashville Predators scored a total of 212 goals in 82 games. That was second worst in the NHL. Friends, take a moment and thank the hockey gods for Cole Smith because he scored 4 goals. And had he not scored those 4 goals, we would have been tied with San Jose in last. So let's take a moment to shout out goal scorer Cole Smith. Okay.
Let's also take a moment to think about what that means, which is that the Chicago Blackhawks scored more goals last year than the Nashville Predators did. I honestly would have thought, had I not known and you told me one team scored fewer than Nashville, I would have thought Chicago. But no.
Friends. Jose. Nope, they beat us. Tampa Bay actually led the league. I thought that was interesting. Tampa Bay led the league in goal scoring even after Steven Stamkos departed. They had 292 goals. That's 80 more goals than the Nashville Predators. Florida, the Stanley Cup champions. I think this is interesting. In the regular season, they were 15th in the league in goals scored. They had 246 total goals scored, which I thought was very interesting and of note. Here's another fun stat in case your stomach isn't constricting tightly. Nashville was 30th in the league in goal differential with a fat, juicy minus 62, friends. That is goals scored minus goals given up in all situations. So it tells you that A, your defense was not great, but B, your offense was also a poop hole, and that all equals disaster. We saw that. Another fun stat, in case you're like, oh, I think I'm remembering this. Well, let's get it into focus. Nashville was last in the league in goals for above expected. Minus 52.11. Nashville scored 52 fewer goals. Let me rephrase that. Nashville didn't score 52 goals they were expected to score. And just the cherry on top of the statistics pie in the face, Nashville ranked 31st in shooting percentage on all shot attempts. They had a 4.24 shooting percentage on all shot attempts. Calgary was the worst in the league with a 4.23. So let's hear it for the 100th% difference. Yay, Nashville. Yeah. It was a disaster, Emma. It was truly statistically remarkable. And eye test watching the games unfold. It was unbelievable to watch Nashville not score goals last season.
I mean, really unwatchable at many points.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I mean, we've said this a lot, but you look at that roster that they started the season with last year, looks pretty different now. But if you look at the roster they started with 84 years ago, you weren't questioning where the goals were going to come from. You were questioning where the defense was going to come from. And that was a question that turned out to be a very valid question by the end of the season. And to Barry Trotz's credit, he's made an effort to address that. But now I have this like deep-seated existential dread where last year, last offseason, the whole point was, okay, the defense is good, the goaltending is good, we need to get scoring. Hey, Barry Trotz, good for you. You went out and got scoring. Did he though?
Did you though?
And now this year, it's like, oh, Barry Trotz, good, you got defense. Now I'm like, well, what if the defense is bad now too? And so, I mean, again, I keep saying this, and I know, believe you me, I am not the poster child for optimism in hockey or really just in life, if we're being honest. But I'm not. I'm trying to be very analytical here and just looking at the facts and saying, by all accounts, for everything that we know, at this point, we have to assume that last year was the outlier, because there are so many years and, so many seasons of all of these different players that would indicate to us that last year was the outlier. So for right now, I have to assume that's what it was. Now, if they start off terribly this season and it's terrible again, well then we're having a different conversation. But for right now, I'm not saying, believe me, I'm not saying forget about what happened last year. We will not forget. We lived
Can't
through
unsee it. Can't unsee it.
No, can't unwatch it. Wish we could, honestly. A lot of my life that I would like back from this last year. But alas, here we are. So I do think, that's what was so frustrating about it. Because, like, for example, you talk about San Jose. San Jose was supposed to be bad. Like, not that any of their fans are going in like, wow, I hope we really suck this year. But it's like, they see the long-term vision. It's like, okay, we're bad now because all of our players are children, and like, we see the future. We'll get there. We have some really good young pieces. It's not our time now, but it will be later. Nashville's time was supposed to be now. And it did not work. And that was what made it seem, I think, even worse than it actually was, is the fact that it was not supposed to be like this at all.
No. And you mentioned Barry Trotz went out last offseason and got goal scorers. Here is what's real. And I know that there are people like, Steven Stamkos is old and Jonathan Marchessault is old and whatever. You don't forget how to score goals in the NHL. Barry Trotz did go out and sign goal scorers. They just did not score goals. And I agree with you. I think you look back at last season and specifically the problem of goal scoring, and it feels like you're looking at a funhouse mirror. Like, you think you know what you look like, but then you go and you stand in front of one mirror and you're tall and skinny and wavy. And then you go stand in another one and you're short and you're broad. And by the end of the funhouse, you're like, what do I really look like? And I think that's where we're at with the Nashville Predators and offense. Okay, I'm not, it looked this way, but then it ended up looking this way on the ice. And what do we really look like? And I agree with you. I think it's going to take some games to sort that out. And I also agree with you. I think last season is more likely the anomaly than the pattern. Coming up, we're going to dive into the big question: why? What happened? What is the number one reason that Nashville had so much trouble scoring goals? We're also going to talk about some individual performances and what we expect to see from these players next season. Today's episode's brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you are all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or friends watching the exciting Nashville SC play some amazing soccer, FanDuel is going to be the best way to make every game even more exciting. You are already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game. You can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app is going to keep it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, it is fast to pay out, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. If you are new to FanDuel, it is a great time to check out the action. New customers right now can bet just $5, and you're going to get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open up the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Emma, I'm just going to go ahead and put you on the hot seat. Tell me, if somebody said to you, why? What is the number one contributing factor to this Nashville Predators roster that we saw last season being so impotent offensively? What is the big reason that you would give? I know there's a lot of factors, but how would you summarize the goal scoring problem?
I mean, with that, I mean, that's the $1,000,000 question, right? And I think that I have to go just solely based on the eye test to answer that because again, by all accounts, by every metric, like measurable stat, this last season makes absolutely no sense. So
No.
I have to go by the eye test a little bit. And I've got to say, like, the most obvious thing to me was the chemistry or the lack
Yeah.
thereof. And I think a lot of it had to do with the constant blending of the lines. I think a lot of it had to do with that sort of leadership paralysis that we've talked about. And I think a lot of it had to do with just guys not knowing what their roles were in on the offense. And I think that again, I know that's not like a measurable thing, but it's just if I look at this roster and then I look at what unfolded on the ice, that's kind of my immediate go-to, I think.
As I was pondering this for this episode, I landed exactly where you are. And I think, people can say these are older veterans, and I understand that, but the production drop off was so dramatic that I think that it is much more than just, well, they're aging veterans. You don't age overnight like that in hockey. That's not how it works. And for me, I kind of landed there too. I think when you don't know for sure who you're playing with or what you're getting from your line mates or how it's going to work, it becomes very difficult to settle in. And you had two major pieces of this offense brand new to this team, and they were put on a line and then immediately changed. And I think that puts a seed of like, oh crap, okay, that's not working in the mind of these players. Oh wait, wow, changing it up, that's not working. What was I not doing, or what do I need to do differently? And then it begins to be more of a mind game. Also, I think the fact that they didn't find immediate success starts sticking with you. And that goes for everybody, across the board. Roman Yossi, all of that. When you go through droughts, point droughts, scoring droughts, Steven Stamkos had the longest, was it point drought, scoring drought of his career last season. that gets to you. But I agree with you. I think it is so undervalued, the chemistry. You need to be able to anticipate what your line mates are thinking and what they're going to do. And there was none of that. So while we look at these individual player performances, there is a podcast that we probably need to do about coaching and goal scoring, and we could dive into that, but friends, that's at least 30 minutes another day. So we're going to have you put a pin in that. We're going to circle back to that. So let's look at these players that we were expecting a lot of the offense to come from. And we're talking about Stamkos. We're talking about Forsberg. We're talking about Yossi. We're talking about Marchessault, Ryan O'Reilly. And I would even add Michael Bunting, when he came over in that. We talked about Steven Stamkos. This season, he scored 27 goals. His 82-game career average, just an average 41 goals, which is a butt ton of goals in an 82-game season. And friends, we saw no butts. We didn't see a butt pound of goals.
Or you could say you saw a lot of butt, depending on your definition here. But yes. Oof.
Oh, it was very difficult to watch. I can only imagine the experience, but it was hard to watch. And I think part of that was, hey, sometimes he was a center, sometimes he was a winger. If you're going to get better production out of Stamkos, Emma, what's the number one thing that has to happen for him next season?
Give him consistent line mates and give him a consistent position.
Yes.
And I think that position, I think that position should be on the wing. I understand the temptation when you look at the Predators center depth, especially now without, even with Colton Sissons, it was bad. Now, without him, it's real bad. So I understand the temptation, the inclination to want to put Stamkos at center, but that screws up too many other things. I think that you're not getting the most out of him as a center. Now, it's one of those things, it's good to know you have it in your back pocket. God forbid someone gets hurt or something like that. You have that as an option, but that shouldn't be your go-to. And I think that you let him play on the wing, it frees him up more to be more mobile. He has that speed and he can get to get over to the wing and, get over to his office and score from there. And I think that you need to free him up a little bit, and to really do his thing. And I think that that's why he's going to be better on the wing. So I think you need to keep him on the wing. You need to keep him with the same guys.
Yes. And the other thing is, and I think this responsibility falls directly on him, and I have a ton of empathy for how it went down last season, but Stamkos has to be where his skates are. And I know last season, the offseason did not go the way that he had hoped that it was going to go. And he jumped to Nashville, and that's a huge transition. You know what? Clear your mind and be where your skates are. And I thought, and I'm not saying that he did a terrible job at that. I'm just saying, you're a Predator now, and whatever mental work you have to do to make peace with what didn't happen in Tampa Bay has to be done. Looking at Filip Forsberg, this is so interesting because we talk about oh my gosh, the offense was so terrible. You know who wasn't? Filip Forsberg was not terrible. I think it felt like it because the season was a dumpster fire, but he was also coming off of that franchise record-setting 48-goal season, and he scored 31 goals. So it feels like, even Forsberg had this major drop-off, but his career average for a season is 33 goals. So while he was a little under his career average, Forsberg was producing. Here is what I think we need from Filip Forsberg, and only the hockey gods could probably grant me this wish. We need him to be luckier. Out of all of the players in the entire NHL, Filip Forsberg was 7th in posts hit, tied for 5th out of all the players in the NHL for hitting the crossbar. The sound, I call it the sound of failure, that little ping And I just feel like Filip Forsberg was thwarted on some sort of hockey god evil level. And so for me, I want to see Filip Forsberg with consistent line mates. Are you picking up our theme here? But I also just want to see him get luckier, because I think, his goal production would have been so much better had he not heard the sound of failure so many times.
Yeah, I think, and we've talked about this before, like it's hard to acknowledge that with everything, like all the calamity that unfolded over the last year, Filip Forsberg actually did not have a bad year in himself individually. Now, the team had a horrible year, and so that got overshadowed for sure. And because he single-handedly could not lift this team out of the depths of despair, that it's like, well, he's not even that good. It's like, no, he just couldn't carry an entire team on his back because he shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
But I think that, like you said, that was another one of those things where it was like, I have to believe that last year was just the outlier.
Yes.
Because like the number of posts, not just that he hit, but just as a team, it felt like they hit so many posts. I also noticed, and I mean, this is not quite the same, but it's something that I saw recently, and forgive me because I don't have the source in front of me, but it was like a stat site where I saw that the Predators led the league in missed wide open nets last year.
I saw that. Yes. Wide open nets.
Yeah, so that's another one. Now, the post you can just chalk up to luck. The wide open nets, that's not bad luck. That's just like, what are we doing? But
you got to get there.
Yeah, you got to get there. But the post thing was so frustrating because it was the doink heard round the world every single time. And how many games did we cover where it was like, oh, that if that one post had been a goal, everything would have been different.
Yep. Yeah. And I love Filip Forsberg. I love that when you look at the numbers, you don't walk away from last season going, well, he was a disaster. But the one thing I will say about Filip Forsberg is that when he's good, he is very good, but he is streaky. And you need your best Filip Forsberg as long as you can stretch that streak out. For this team to be successful, you need your best. Jonathan Marchessault, his career average for a season, 29 goals this season. He had 21 goals. Roman Josi, of course, was injured. He usually averages 16 goals a season. This season, he only had 9 goals. Of course, he missed, I think, the last 25 games of the season, something like that, due to injury. And then Michael Bunting, who joined the team late, but let's not overlook Michael Bunting because I think he is going to be an important piece for the Predators next season. And again, podcast for another day, stick a pin in Michael Bunting in the topic of Michael Bunting. Let's not like voodoo doll Michael Bunting. But his career average
had his appendix taken out. He's been through enough.
Leave him alone. His career average for a season, 23 goals. This season, 19 goals. Ryan O'Reilly was only 1 goal off of his season average. He scored 21 goals. He usually averages 22 goals. But if you look at those players, and I'm talking about Stamkos, I'm talking Forsberg, Marchessault, Josi, Michael Bunting, Ryan O'Reilly. If those guys just get back to their season average, stay healthy, and just have an average 82-game season, that's a 36 goal difference. And that last year would have put Nashville in the middle of the league. You need your best players to be your best players. But coming up, we can't just point the fingers at the veterans. Who else has to step up offensively? Friends, we're going to be talking about some of the young sprouts next season. It is always very tempting, Emma, to look at the veterans and be like, what are y'all doing? And I think that's a fair question. When it comes to goal scoring, we were counting on the veterans to really kind of move this offense forward. And they're going to have to do it next season. But I also think that there are a couple young players where the pressure is on offensively. And the first one I think of is Luke Evangelista. And, this really, I want this to be the season for Vange. And part of that has to do, again, I go back to coaching. Andrew Brunette at some point is going to have to decide to trust Luke Evangelista with ice time and quality line mates. You just have to decide. And you just have to ride it out with Luke Evangelista. Now, Luke needs to show that he is ready to consistently have that ice time and have those quality line mates. But I'm telling you, Emma, I need Luke Evangelista to have the offensive season that I believe he's capable of.
Yeah, and what is frustrating is that we've seen the results when he is put with more skilled line mates consistently, not just for one shift or one game, Andrew Brunette, but for an entire string of games. We see the results. And he's a very skilled playmaker. He's got really good hands. And I think that, it's hard when he gets buried down in the bottom six. You just don't get as much from him. I think, for example, like a Zach LaRue. Zach LaRue has that physical edge to his game. He also has the scoring touch. But if you put him in the bottom six, you're not like, where did Zach LaRue go? Like, he just leans more into that physical side. But Evangelista, if you take away his playmaking and you don't put him with skilled line mates, then you kind of lose him. And so I agree. I think it's going to be important to trust him in a top six role. I think that putting him on even the second line, put him with Svechkov and Stamkos even. I think that could go a long way for him.
Yeah. And I think we saw his game elevate when he played with those high skilled veterans. I agree with you. I think we saw his game elevated, but you gotta give him some leash, man. Give him some leash. In 2023-24, Vange played 80 games and he had 16 goals. Now, last season, he only played 68 games because he was injured, only had 10 goals. But even Evangelista will tell you there were some that he should have, there were goals that I'm sure he has been awake. I can't get there. What is that? Laid awake? Is it laid awake? Lane awake?
Or no, Lane. I think it's Lane. Yeah.
Been awake.
Laid would be like you lay something down. But if you're the one doing the laying or the lying, it's like oh, none of my high school English teachers are watching this.
Let's hear for journalism. Journalism. I wonder if he thinks about Luke Evangelista probably thinks about some of those missed opportunities offensively. But that's a player, Emma, isn't realistic. And help me stay in the land of realism because, everybody loves Vange. Is it realistic to think that if he had consistent line mates and consistent minutes, that he could be a 20-goal scorer? Or is that stretching?
It's possible. Maybe. This last year was also hard to judge as well because he missed some time with his injuries as well. So it was hard. It's like he kind of started behind the ball and he never really had a chance to fully catch up. And so it's hard to say. I think he could. But I'm not super positive about that.
Yeah.
Now, I think we could see his assist totals skyrocket if he's with more consistent, consistent playing time, consistent line mates. He was really, really skilled at getting the puck two guys. And so that's where I think personally we'll see the most growth from him if he's able to kind of get into that role.
Yeah. The other young player, and I this probably will eventually this offseason be a whole podcast because I stress about these things. And it'll just be like therapy for me, and y'all can tune in and listen. I feel like there is a lot of pressure, a lot of expectation on Fedor Svechkov. And there is a lot that makes me feel like, yes, this is okay. He's going to be great, because I think he was the player that we saw his trajectory trending in the right direction. Of course, growth is not linear, but we really saw his trajectory in his NHL time improve overall. Like the opportunity that he has in front of him. But I have to tell you, I feel a little scarred from the Tommy Novak situation. Tommy Novak was like, hey, you're going to go in there and you're going to center Stamkos and Marchessault, and this could be your big opportunity, and wah, wah, wah. And I know that they are two very different players, in a lot of ways. How important is this year, and how important is Svechkov's growth going to be to the Predators' offense turning some things around?
Well, I think it's going to be huge because we talked about the center depth or lack thereof. And I think that now, and I mean, going back to Tommy Novak, that Novak trade was the Predators handing the keys to Fedor Svechkov and saying, you're the guy now.
Yeah.
The guy, meaning you're our 2C. And I think we agree that that's probably where his ceiling is, and that's okay. But I think now that he doesn't have Tommy Novak around, it's kind of like he is supply and demand at this point. So it's like, who are you gonna make your second line center? Eric Holla or
heavens,
Michael McCarron? Like, no.
Let's
not, Andrew Brunette. I know it's tempting because their ages start with a 3, but maybe let's not. I think that it's with Fedor Svechkov, I understand we're a little scarred by Tommy Novak. But here's the thing, Svechkov, a big part of why Tommy Novak didn't work out was he got kind of ragdolled around. It wasn't just his size. Yes, he's a smaller guy, but he was pretty slippery. He could get out of places, but he had zero physical edge to his game whatsoever.
Right.
Svechkov is a little bit more of a power forward, maybe not a true pure power forward, but definitely more of that element to him. And we saw him get better as the year went on. We saw him score in those clutch moments. He came up big for them a few times. We saw him throw the body around. We saw him, get better at distributing the puck. And so I think that he's just a very different player. And I think that now, again, talking about guys knowing what their roles are, I think now Svechkov, if the roster stays the way it is, it's well, you are the 2C. Looking around, who else is going to do it?
Nobody else is there.
Yeah. So I think that that'll be a good thing. And again, goes back to what Barry Trotz said about we want to have opportunities for these young players. That's great. Now Andrew Brunette needs to enforce it and give them those opportunities.
Thank you. Yes. The other thing I will say about Svechkov, and, in the locker room clean out at the end of the season, kind of one of the vibes that we got via, just some conversation with Steven Stamkos is not super jazzed to stick around for a rebuild and be like, hey, I'm going to be the old guy showing you the ropes. Buddy, on that line with Fedor Svechkov, you better be the old guy showing him the ropes, because it will make you better. And it will make this team so much better if that second line of Svechkov and Stammer and whoever, whether it's Michael Bunting, whether it's Luke Evangelista, whoever, that is going to be so important, because we have seen a team in recent history that had one scoring line, the top scoring line, and then the rest, not so much. Nashville absolutely cannot have that. If you want to turn this offensive scoring drought around, you have got to be scoring up and down the lineup. I mean, we saw it in the championship. We saw it in the Stanley Cup Finals. We saw it in the playoffs. You have to produce up and down your lineup. And it's going to be especially important for that second line to be a big driver of offense and to, like, quite frankly, score the goals. And that means that Stamkos is going to have to help Svech and help him grow. So there's some pressure on the veterans. I think that there is some pressure on the young players. I think there is also some pressure on Andrew Brunette, and that's something, like I said, we're going to put a pin in that and talk about what we want to see differently from Andrew Brunette. We're going to tackle that later on this week. Tomorrow, we are going to let you know what we learned from one of the newest Nashville Predators blue liners. We have some media availability coming up later this morning, so we're going to share that with you and talk a little bit more about defense because, friends, the number of topics, the number of things that need to improve for the Nashville Predators this offseason will keep Emma and I very, very busy discussing it. So what do you all think is going to be the biggest key to getting the Nashville Predators some goal scoring next season? Let us know in the comments on our YouTube video. You can, of course, let us know on social media, LO_Predators. You can find us there on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I'm old school. It's Twitter. Emma, before we log off, will you let everyone know where they can find you and your work?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter. It's Twitter and Instagram at Emma_Lingan, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
You can find me on Twitter at @K_Mama on Ice. You can find my work with Penalty Box Radio as well. Friends, that's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks again so much for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back tomorrow to talk blue liners. We'll see you then.